Hello and welcome to the Empowered, Sensitive and Creative podcast. My name is Rim. I'm an artist, a certified life coach and an NLP practitioner, and the creator of the Empowered, Sensitive and Creative retreats. Passionate about celebrating joy and beauty in the everyday, especially when things are falling apart, I'm insatiably curious about human nature, and I look into the world with reverence, awe, and a sense of wonder. Tune in for stories exploring healing through creativity, art, embracing sensitivity, and navigating the subconscious mind. I'll talk about the struggles that highly sensitive and creative people face, and share my experiences, insights, and favorite tools along the way. I'm here to empower you to turn what we often deem to be a curse into your biggest gift. I believe that the more we create together, the more we heal the world. So let's dive in. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Empowered, Sensitive and Creative podcast. I'm so happy and grateful for you tuning in. Today I want to talk about love. I never thought I'd be talking about this topic one day, really. I can't help but smile at the irony of me talking about and preaching this concept of self-love. Yes, I'm not talking about love, but self-love, which is, I believe, the biggest form of love, at least the most important, because everything comes from that. Everything else comes from that. But I used to be the cynical and sarcastic teenager who didn't believe in love at all. I think part of it is due to French education. I mean, I don't know how it is in other countries, but in the French system, we study a lot of sad love stories, sadness of, and especially. Okay, so Twinkle just got onto my lap. Maybe she knows that I'm talking about love and she wants a big cuddle from her mama. So, yes, French literature, especially from the 19th century, is not really conducive to believing in happy love between two people, like not happy romantic relationships at all. And well, I can understand. At that time society was even more conditioned than what we are now. So but actually, when I think about that, I think Russian literature is also quite sad in that regard, in the regard of love. And yeah, I used to one of my favorite book was War and Peace. And well, there is a true love story there, like a few true love stories, but they end very badly. They end by death. So yeah, I think I very early on I thought, okay, love sucks actually. It only makes for heartaches and despair and death, and there's I need to protect my heart because it can be very fragile and it's something to be protected. And on the other hand, there was all this rom-com stuff from the 90s, and I thought that was really vanilla and marshmallow-like, ugh, yuck, it's funny to watch, it's like a secret indulgence, but I would never admit that I liked those movies. And actually, I didn't really like them. They were just fun. But yeah. So the concept of self-love, so you can imagine if I didn't believe in love, the concept of self-love was very foreign to me. It's something I've never heard about this before. I think it was in my mid-30s through the work of Catherine Woodward Thomas. In her books, she talks a lot about directing the mirror towards yourself with love, kindness, and compassion so that you can be at peace with yourself. At that time, I really wanted to I was still believing in manifestation, and I wanted to manifest the one. And her concept is, her book is calling in the one, and actually her idea, what she said at the end, calling in the one is calling in yourself. You are the one for yourself. And this is true. I didn't find the one externally, but I did find me, and that's the greatest gift I could find, and that's what I want. That's what I want to explore today in this episode. But first, I want to address a big question that I had with myself, and you may have, which is, why do I think it's important to cultivate self-love as a sensitive and creative soul? Like, is it going to help me be more creative or be less sensitive? Or, like, what's the point of talking about that? And, well, I believe that one creates better things out of love rather than out of self-loathing. Granted, some very talented artists, others, painters, blah, 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 they did create masterpieces while suffering from depression, anxiety, self-loathing, low self-esteem, and so on. But honestly, I don't envy their life at all. I have, in my own life, I have the very example of my dad. He was a genius, really, like artistically speaking. He was so talented. Everything he touched with his hands turned into beauty. It's like he had fingers of gold. And he could see all the beauty in the world. He was really, for that, like, this was amazing. But he was really not happy. And I don't think he loved himself. Like, I don't know, we never talked about this. But I really suspect he didn't love himself. He was unable to love his family. And I remember him telling me, he used to drink a lot. So when he was really drunk, and I remember him telling me so many times, like in a very sad way, that he didn't want to live anymore. And I thought at that time that he was like a drama queen. I was like, stop doing your drama. Just stop. Like, if you don't want to live, don't live. That's how I was taking it as a teenager. But the truth is that he kind of did it. He ended up drinking up to drowning himself, and then he became ill in his late 50s and passed away at 60, so which is a very premature death. And at the end, he was not creating anymore. Yes, he had this potential, and he displayed it very early on. He was an incredibly talented artist, but his self-loathing ended up sabotaging his art. He stopped creating things and making things. When I was a child, I remember he was still doing stuff, but then I think around age 10, like when I was around age 10, he kind of stopped. He was very disillusioned by the world we live in, our society, and he lived in a dictatorship with a lot of corruption as well, so that didn't help for sure. But he stopped making things. And so my question is, what's the point to have talent if it doesn't serve you to be happy, to be happier, and to live a beautiful life? He gave up. He suffered a lot, and he made all of his family suffer a lot along with him. I suspect him to be an HSP anyway, because he was so sensitive to everything. But I don't know. I will never know for sure. But this brings me to something else. I really want to say, it's a big disclaimer, I'm not a mental health professional. I am not a mental health specialist, and I'm not pretending to be. I'm just talking here about my experience, my observation, and I'll talk also about some resources I've read and some encounters I had with some professionals, but I am not I'm not pretending. So if you suspect you suffer from mental health issues, please do seek support and help from a licensed mental health professional, because coaching is not mental health support. It's an addition. Just be careful with whom you work. Make sure my biggest advice is make sure they understand what it is to be an HSP and to be an empath. I think I'll record an episode about my experience with unhealthy health professionals. But anyway, that's for another time. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because personally, there were times in my life where I felt such deep confusion, intense emotions, melancholy, that I actually lost the will to live. There were times where really I thought, I'm gonna end it, I can't anymore, it's not worth, And I really thought there was something wrong with me and that I could never make it, I could never be seen, be understood, and be truly loved for myself. And if you're going through such times, first I want to say, please don't give up. You are not alone. And also, if it feels really bad and you have no one to talk to, yes, please seek help, because you can be helped. You don't have to live like that forever. And learning to loving yourself is possible even with deep mental health issues. But for that, you need support. Later, I understood that a big part of that was due to my empathetic and extra sensitive nature. Another part was due to my family trauma, my childhood trauma, but also my family trauma. I had a session with Mark Wallin, the director of the Family Constellation Institute. If you haven't heard of him, he works on inherited trauma. One of his books is called It Didn't Start With You. And he got me to inquire deep into my lineage, especially the maternal side of my family, into their traumas. And that made me see how difficult it was to access self-love, given what the women in my lineage had gone through. And it's even not only the women in my family, it's also the women of the world. Of course, we are impacted still with our past, with the past of our society. Sorry about the background noise, like a squeaky noise. It's my dog playing with her new toy. So our lineage and our heritage, genetic heritage, but also social heritage, has an impact on us. And also, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, our childhood. Like I said, my dad, he was very talented, but he didn't love himself, he didn't love life. And there's something else that his influence his influence led me to block out the notion of love. He used to be this kind of person who keeps saying a lot, I love you, I love you, I love you, but they don't act accordingly at all. You know what I mean? It's the kind of love bombing situation. And well, that's very confusing and infuriating for a youngster growing up and learning about trust. And then, as an empath and a highly sensitive person, I found it natural to, I modeled my mom. She is also an empath and an HSP, to prioritize caring for the well-being of others and focusing on their needs before my own needs. They can't handle it, but you can. Make an effort was the tune I grew up to. Maybe this is something you'll relate to. I think it's quite common amongst empaths and sensitive. At that time, obviously, I didn't know what an empath was and what a highly sensitive person was. But later, I understood that actually a big part of my lack of self-love was due to my empathetic and extra sensitive nature. A part was family trauma, childhood trauma for sure, but also it was about being very, very sensitive and very attuned to the others. And then another, it's like pieces of a puzzle, a jigsaw puzzle coming together. I don't believe there's one thing and that's the source of everything else. I think it's a lot of different pieces that kind of can be linked together and they build upon each other, but sometimes they don't necessarily build upon each other. They're just next to each other. So another thing is, I realized that my sisters, they are gaslighting experts. I didn't know. I was not aware about the term gaslighting. I just didn't understand why they hated me so much, especially the elder one, because the young one we used to get on very well before. But the elder one, it was always hate hatred, maybe a bit of love, but it was mainly hatred since I was born. So there was a lot of fight. There were a lot of fights, and for a very, very long time, I thought maybe there's something wrong with me. Why she cannot accept me? Maybe I'm not talking well enough. Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I don't express myself well enough. I'm not as talented as she is, or I'm more messy than she is, and all of these things. But of course, in my always in that time, and it's 30 when I hit 30s. I was feeling more and more suffocated by this gaslighting and this kind of unhealthy relationships, and this notion in the family that their feelings, their emotion, their needs, what they have to say are more important than mine. And I understood that by trying to carrying a relationship with them, I was actually negating my needs, and by negating my needs, I was negating myself. So it was like a self-abandonment, abandoning myself in a way. I talk more about being an HSP and self-abandonment in podcast episode 22, if you're interested to learn more about that. But really, the problem about gaslighting is that it's very insidious, and it's really difficult because when you grow up, you're building your personality, and you're also building your relationship to yourself. But when gaslighting is part of life or your family dynamic, and I'm not blaming my parents because they also suffered from gaslighting themselves. My sisters, they were children, of course. As adults, they have the choice to not be like that anymore. They have the choice to behave differently, but that's another story. Actually, that's their responsibility. I cannot do anything about it. They choose who they want to be. But for me, now that I'm an adult, I can see that obviously this gaslighting didn't help me form a loving relationship with myself. And that being said, I can choose differently now. And I can also see, because I used to beat myself up, like, why I'm screwing things up, or why I'm not that smart, or why I'm failing at my relationships, or why I can't meet the right people for me. Why am I always walking into toxic work relationships? Why am I attracting narcissistic women? And well, I think it's normal, it's like natural to go through these questions because we try to make sense. But actually now I can see this part of me with more compassion, and like, okay, that's when you were a little girl, you were not loved probably, like you were loved, but in a weird way. And some of that was healthy, and some of that love was not healthy, and you didn't learn how to love yourself, and that's okay, because now you can. Now that you're aware of it, you can. So what I take from that is that in order to love yourself, the first step is to become aware, to open your eyes and see what's going on. And of course, the next step is usually blaming, like blaming others and then blaming yourself, and but that keeps us in the loop of victimhood, and that's not very loving. So then after that, it's learning how to see ourselves with compassion, and that will lead to acceptance. I'm not sure which one is first, compassion or acceptance. Maybe it's both. It doesn't matter. But self-awareness, self-compassion, self-acceptance, that's how it is, that's how it was. That was the story then, but now I can change it. And I really believe that's the biggest gift you can give yourself, because trying to be somebody else to please others, or trying to always find reasons why things are not happening for you or to you, or why things are happening to you, why did they do that? Why do they do that? Why do I do that? It's not healthy, and it's like always looking for a reason to criticize yourself, and that takes up so much energy that it's really hard to have energy left to create, to dedicate to your creation of your projects, but also creation to the life you want, which is a pity, because life can be so much more and so much more interesting when we have energy for that, energy and time. And actually, another key that another thing that takes up a lot of energy is this second guessing yourself and always, outsourcing your decisions and outsourcing responsibility. I used to do that a lot. I was terrified at the idea of making a decision on my own. I mean, I did make some on my own, but sometimes it worked well, but then when I realized sometimes it doesn't work well, like I've screwed up something, I took it as a sign. You see, you screw it up. It's not safe to trust yourself, and you should not be trusted with making good decisions. And then I got into a spiral of totally looking outside of myself, and it was really painful. It's like, you know what, I don't know, the image that comes to me is the dog who tries to bite its own tail and it doesn't realize it's his own tail. Yeah, well, and speaking of liberating energy and space and always prioritizing other needs, I am reading a book called Burnout: The Secret to Solving the Stress Cycle by Emily and Amelia Nagasaki. And there's one expression that really stood out to me. They call it the human giver syndrome. Actually, it's not their own quote. I mean, they quote it from somebody else. I'm gonna read an excerpt. In Down Girl, The Logic of Misogyny, philosopher Kate Mann describes a system in which one class of people, the human givers, are expected to offer their time, attention, affection, and bodies willingly, placidly to the other class of people, the human beings. The implication in these terms is that human beings have a moral obligation to be or express their humanity, while human givers have a moral obligation to give their humanity to the human beings. Guess which one women are? The human givers are the attentive, loving subordinates to the human beings. The giver's role is to give their whole humanity to the beings, so that the beings can be their full humanity. Givers are expected to abdicate any resource or power they may happen to acquire. Their jobs, their love, their bodies, those belong to the beings. Human givers must at all times be pretty, happy, calm, generous, and attentive to the needs of others, which means they must never be ugly, angry, upset, ambitious, or attentive to their own needs. Givers are not supposed to need anything. If they dare to ask for, or, God forbid, demand anything, that's a violation of their role as a giver, and they may be punished. And if a giver doesn't obediently and sweetly hand over whatever being wants, for that too the giver may be punished, shamed, or even destroyed. In human giver syndrome, the giver isn't allowed to inconvenience anyone with anything so messy as emotions, so givers are trapped in a situation where they are not free to move through the tunnel. They might even be punished for it. Your body, with its instinct for self-preservation, knows on some level that human giver syndrome is slowly killing you. That's why you keep trying mindfulness and green smoothies and self-care trend after self-care trend. But that instinct for self-preservation is battling a syndrome that insists that self-preservation is selfish. So your efforts to care for yourself might actually make things worse, activating even more punishment from the world or from yourself, because how dare you? Okay, in their book they say that the human givers are women, but I would argue, yes, true, but also highly sensitive people and empaths. So I would imagine that men, those who identify as men and who are also highly sensitive and empaths, they might also relate to that syndrome. And I can see how I've been acting out of that syndrome. Yeah, it's a disease, it's true. I feel like when we have this syndrome, the human giver, it's as if we forget that we have a little inner child within us who still has some needs, who needs to be. A child's purpose is to be. They're not supposed to be born to give, they're supposed to be. But then when we are conditioned to give, we forget about being. And I can see now in retrospect, I can see how much I had forgotten my inner child, little Rim. And I'm giving my example, but I think so many of us forget our own little child within. And by giving too much to others, I was inflicting my inner child, what I was reproaching others to inflict me. For example, reproaching myself or reproaching her, reproaching myself to be too sensitive, reproaching myself to be too emotional, numbing my emotions with binge eating or binge drinking or binge exercising, even binge working, trying to compensate my perceived shortcomings, which, by the way, were what others around me had shamed me for, by overworking and constantly trying to learn new skills. I love learning, nothing against learning, but I think I said almost at every episode, I think it can become a compulsion when you learn so much, like you never do anything. I mean, you never take action, you never put into practice what you learn. It's coming from a place of lack, not a place of, it doesn't necessarily come from a place of curiosity. Then it's unhealthy. Ignoring my needs and instead catering to others' needs, and believing that other people's emotions were my responsibilities and that I was always the faulty one and the reason why people were not happy. Another one was believing that my art was not good enough, that I should always aspire to higher and higher standards and strive for some, I don't know, like a level of perfection that actually was always out of reach. I was addicted to being perpetually disappointed. I was addicted to being a victim until I couldn't take it anymore. From small daily heartbreaks to huge, big, shattering heartbreaks, I finally got exhausted to be quote-unquote the victim. My past doesn't define me. I no longer want to play the blame game. It doesn't mean that some people do bad things, but it's more about, instead of putting all my attention on what I did wrong and to what they did wrong, is like getting back to my well-being, getting back to myself, getting back to my emotions, to me, to nurture myself. And I remember one day I was feeling really low. I had been feeling very low, and I was like, no, that's enough. And I put my hands on my heart and promised myself I would never let myself down again. And I vowed to learn how to welcome my emotions and how to take responsibility for how I feel every day. And that includes taking care of my inner child. Learning how to treat her with the same love, tenderness, and care that you would your child or any sensitive kid. And that completely changed everything. Because love, like the power of love, is the one thing that helps to soothe our soul, but also to soothe our nervous system. Because when we have been neglected in the past, when we've had trauma, and most of us have been traumatized in one way or another, when we are sensitive, highly sensitive, our nervous system is more sensitive than the average. And if we had trauma, it's even more sensitive. And later on, when we grow up, even when we're adults, triggering situations, it leads to a dysregulation of our nervous system, basically. But it's really hard to feel good, and it's really hard to process emotions, and it's very hard to be clear with ourselves when our nervous system is dysregulated. And unconditional love is the one vibration that allows our nervous system to calm down, to soothe, to regulate. I like to think of this unconditional love that a mother has for her child. And basically, as an adult, I'm supposed to be that for myself, to give that to myself, really. So I'm gonna share some tips or some ideas on how you can practice self-love in your life, how you can love yourself more. But first, I want to share something about human design. If you've listened to my podcast before, you might have noticed that I really like human design. But I think if you don't know, it would be interesting to check your chart and see whether you have an open G center. The G center is our identity center. It's the center for self-love and self-worth. It's interesting because mine is undefined, which means I don't have access to consistent energy for self-love, direction, purpose, self-worth. Like naturally, I don't have access to this consistently. But it also means it's always like that in the human design world. But I think it's like that. Like I believe it's like that. Even if you don't relate, or if you don't like human design, if you don't believe or pay attention to it, it's this idea of double-edged sword. So something might be a source of pain, like sensitivity or empathy. It can be a source of pain, as I've just been talking about this. in this episode, but then there is a gift in it. There is room for a lot of wisdom, a lot of learnings, and the things we learn, we kind of pay attention to them more in our life. In a way, it becomes more precious, and it develops compassion and a better understanding of human nature and better understanding of what others are going through. So it can be a good thing too, if we know how to harness it in a positive way, in a healthy way, of course. So how to practice more self-love in your life? Well, it starts with forgiving yourself and having compassion for yourself for all the things that happened before, and also on the days, like, I think that includes showing compassion to yourself for the days when you're not being kind, or you've not been kind to yourself, or the days things don't work the ways you'd hope. I've had for the past several weeks, I've had a big bout of melancholy, and I was not satisfied with myself. And guess what? This energy didn't help me to be more satisfied with myself and do the things faster or better. It just led to more melancholy and more frustration. And actually, I think melancholy is undervalued. It's something we tend to be afraid of. But what I've noted is there's also, while learning human design, I saw that I have a strong, it's really part of my design. So apparently it's part of my DNA. It helps because that's why I like human design and astrology, because it kind of gives me, because I always love to know why, to understand things. It gives me a way to understand that actually I don't need to go and look too far into the reasons why, but it's like that's how it's meant to be. I'm meant to experience this. And melancholy is can be a source for beautiful creative expression if we can embrace it instead of beating ourselves for it. And I've been practicing accepting that more and more, and not attaching myself to it, not judging myself for it. And I know it will pass, because it's it's like emotions and moods, they come and they go, and it's possible to hold different aspects of yourself at the same time. I can be melancholic and I can still feel joy from time to time, and then at some other times I will have more energy and I will feel more lit up and alive in a way. But it doesn't mean I won't have temporary difficult emotions at the same time. And that's all okay. So loving yourself more can also look like, not ghosting. For me, it's like not ghosting myself when friends or a potential date or even clients ghost me. In the past, I'd have complained and asked myself, why? What did I do to deserve that? Or why do I always screw up? Or there must be something wrong with me. But now I'm like, okay, no, like ghosting is not a good thing to do. And that's okay. That's their choice. I have nothing to do with it. And that doesn't mean anything about me. I don't need to take, this is their thing, their crap that they should be dealing with if they want to, but it's not mine. So when someone ghosts me now, I double down on self-care. And self-care can mean different things. For me, it's dancing, singing, playing, journaling, and most of all, creating. Whenever I have those moments where I have really negative emotions, I always find that getting back, maybe not right away, because usually a good cry is good. Not always. Sometimes I don't need to cry, but I need to do something for myself, something that is nurturing. And creative expression is always very nurturing. Self-love can also mean taking time off and resting if and when we need it. Taking the time to process your emotions, of course, without rushing them, without judging them. It can also look like accepting the darker aspects of my personality, of my psyche, like being okay with not being perfect, being okay with being selfish at times, or not, with not being nice at times, and being okay, and then that's fine. Like it's being able to hold different aspects of myself and not judging myself for it. And then looking for evidence of my lovability, of my worth right now, even if things are not perfect, even if some elements are not to my liking, and actually by accepting that I'm lovable and worthy just right now, just the way I am. It's like taking this out of the equation, really not banging my head on trying to prove it, not looking for outside evidence. So that includes not caring at all about manifestation. I don't need to have the perfect house, to have the perfect job, to have a lot of money in my bank, to have the best friends, the best partner, the best of everything, the perfect body, and all of that to be lovable and worthy. And the same goes to you. But then, of course, when we are not used to see ourselves like that, it can be hard to believe it. So then looking for evidence of that is a good way, but not externally. It's more internally. And that helps to take responsibility for the situations you dislike and to actually see what needs to change. And then you can begin to see that you can change them, that no matter what, you can handle things, you can handle life, you can handle challenges. That being said, when our nervous system is dysregulated and we are all so frazzled, it's really difficult to see things clearly, to see possibilities, even to have compassion, because we're in a dysregulated state. Like, the nervous system is here to protect us, and protect us as in safety. But it's like coming from the I'm sure you've heard this comparison, because it's something we see everywhere these days, this comparison to how humans evolved they had to keep themselves safe, and they had to protect themselves from threat when they were living in nature, so protect themselves from lions or bears and so on. And we kind of kept this instinctive protection mechanisms and this instinct for survival. So when we are triggered by a situation now in our days and times, when we are triggered by something that is not going well, by emotions, by something, our nervous system shuts down and it goes into survival mode, really. And then it's really hard to soothe, to calm down, and to relax. The first thing is to regulate your nervous system. And my favorite practice, so before I shared all these things, creating, dancing, all of that, it's great. But sometimes my nervous system emotion feels so intense, I feel so dysregulated that I feel like I could really do I feel like my inner child could really do with a motherly love. And what I really love is to do a self-love meditation, really, where I literally talk to myself and talk to the different parts of my body. Because we are so much more than our minds, right? Emotions are energy in motion. So it's really important to get in touch with these different parts of our body and to learn to notice where is the emotion located. I created a video where I share this meditation. You can find it on YouTube. I'll put it in the show note. And I've also created an audio version of this meditation. So that you could do it, you could practice it, you could do it every day, and actually several times a day would be great. For me, when I know I go through times where I'm more fragile and I feel like I need extra self-care, I put my alarm clock. I put the alarm like several times per day, like 5, 6, 7 times per day. And it's a reminder for self-love, because the thing is so easy to forget. When you try new practices, you might remember for a while, but life goes on and we get carried away, and we can forget, especially when it's not ingrained in our daily habits yet. So I usually, like, I've been doing this for several years, but obviously I do go through times where I'm off balance and I forget. And then I remember and I put my alarm clocks, and and then every time it buzzes, I'm like, okay, reminder. And I don't need to do, you don't need to, if you want to do that, you don't need to do this for 20 minutes. It can be just 1 minute. But remembering to get back to yourself, to your inner child, to your body, to your soul, 6 times per day, 6 times 1 minute, it's already good. And it really helps to, like, every time I do that, after I feel good, I feel more relaxed, I feel more loving, more forgiving. Like, I feel my body, the energy in my body more expansive and no more not constricted anymore, sorry. And by the way, this is a form of subconscious reprogramming, because that's by sending your brain, your subconscious, this message of, okay, I'm gonna send you love. And when we do that, we connect to our senses. That's a way for neural pathways to rewire. It's like rewriting the codes for our nervous system, really, which the nervous system is linked to our subconscious. So anyway, I created this audio, and you can find it on my website in the shop under meditation and hypnosis audios. I will also put the link in the show notes. And if you're listening to this and you find yourself cynical and sarcastic, well, I understand. I used to feel like that, but really, I realized that this cynicism was in fact a way to keep myself small, to beat myself up even before others could criticize me. It's a way to build walls around our heart. So I would invite you to look at that. But really, like, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter which technique you use, which techniques you try, as long as you find the one that works for you. But really, developing a loving relationship with yourself is a big, big game changer, you will see. Switching from inner critic to inner loving as a default mode can change your life. It is like the roots of a tree. I know I'm still with my garden and my garden metaphor, but it's like the roots of a tree, really, healthily planted into the ground and nourished by a fertile soil. Love is a fertile soil, because from this self-love, everything else will grow and flow through you. So my dear creative and sensitive soul, please, 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 please learn to accept, welcome, care for, and love all of yourself, including your sensitivity. If you're an empath, accept and love that as well about you. And others around you will too, at least those who matter. We don't need the others. We don't need everyone to love us. Loving yourself gives you wings, really. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if it has inspired you, please share it around you. Also, if you feel called to it, please subscribe to the podcast and leave me a review. It really helps to spread the word out. All your questions are welcome. You can send them to me on Instagram at rim.creativenergy.com or email me via my website rimcreativenergy.com, and don't worry, I'll share in the show notes exactly where to find me. Until next time, sending you loving creative energy.